So last week I saw a comment from Kieran Alcott asking me to do a video update on what exactly has been sent as military aid to Ukraine. And I thought, good idea.
You stupid.
So once I began digging into it, it became apparent there is a lot of stuff that has been shipped. And I kind of knew that already, but I just didn't realise how much and by whom. And as it is probably one of the most relevant military subjects today, I shall run down the list country by country. Please note this will be a far from complete list, as I can only go on publicly available sources, plus I shall limit it to military equipment, as the vast amounts of humanitarian aid being supplied by countries and organisations across the world to Ukraine would probably take me literally all week to read out. So with that said, here we go. Not a lot of information here, but the Albanian government has stated that they have supplied Ukraine with, quote, military equipment, but not specified exactly what. Australia has supplied 6 M77 155mm howitzers for use by the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the UAF, plus 20 Bushmaster personnel carriers. They have also announced that they intend to send an additional 20 Bushmasters plus 14 M113 armoured personnel carriers that they shall draw from their reserve stocks. Australia has also donated several $100 million worth of other military equipment and ammunition. Though not supposedly for military use, but rather to protect civilians, Austria has supplied 10,000 helmets and an unspecified quantity of body armour. Belgium was an early supplier of small arms to Ukraine, sending 2,000 FN-FNC rifles, which have been seen mainly in the hands of foreign volunteers. This was followed up by an announcement at the end of February that the country would be sending another 3,000 quote machine guns and 200 quote anti-tank weapons, and Belgium is currently believed to have supplied 10,000 small arms altogether. In addition to the FNCs, photos exist of troops in Ukraine using the FN-2000 and the FN Scar rifle, though whether this was aid from Belgium, another country, or a batch purchased by Ukraine pre-war is unknown. As for the anti-tank weapons, honestly your guess is as good as mine, but I suspect it was M72 Law rockets, a simple and cheap expedient at the time. Reports in the Belgian press in April state that the government there intended to send their fifth shipment of supplies and that this would include guided anti-tank missiles. My guess is that this was composed of Milan launchers and missiles, which the Belgian army is in the process of replacing, and which other suppliers are known to have also sent. Bit of a tricky one this, because the Bulgarian government traditionally tried to stay on good terms with Russia, though the war in Ukraine has diminished this relationship considerably. Nonetheless, Bulgaria, unlike most other contributors, tends to be much quieter on what it is supplying. Officially, the Bulgarians have supplied 2,000 helmets and bulletproof vests for civilian usage. In fact, Bulgaria has long been a major supplier of small arms ammunition, RPGs, grenades and artillery shells to Ukraine, as it has large Soviet-era arms complexes that produce the same calibers as used by the Ukrainian armed forces. In fact, aircraft trackers show NATO military aircraft leaving daily from Bulgaria to supply depots in Poland, the assumption being these carry supplies for the Ukrainians. And in fact, the open secret that Bulgaria is a major supplier is graphically illustrated by the fact that the country's exports in March this year reached its highest level ever. But in terms of specifics, that's about as good as I can give you. Another country to have supplied Ukraine with M777 howitzers, Canada has sent 4 of these guns, along with an unspecified quantity of GPS-guided Excalibur shells to go with them. Canada has also supplied 100 M2 Carl Gustav anti-tank launchers, along with 2,000 rounds of ammunition for them, and 4,500 M72 Laws. Additionally, they have provided considerable quantities of hand grenades, surveillance drones, body armour, and night vision gear. They also plan to supply 8 Rochelle Senator 4x4 APCs and possibly LAV infantry vehicles in the future. Croatia has stated that they have donated €16.5 million in military aid, which some sources state includes 20,000 Zastava M70 rifles that date back to the days of Yugoslavia. As Croatia has long taken these weapons out of service and placed them in storage, and these types of rifles have been seen in Ukraine, it is entirely possible that this is correct. The Czechs have been a major supporter of the Ukrainians and have been pretty open about what they have sent. They are the first on this list to supply actual tanks to Ukraine. Czechia have supplied at least 12 T-72 tanks, with the intention of transferring at least 40 in total. They have also supplied considerable numbers of infantry fighting vehicles, with at least 5 Czech-built variants of the BMP-1 being given, as well as the Czech government transferring another 56 PBV 501s, which are a variant built by the former East Germany and which the Swedes had purchased at the end of the Cold War. These were then purchased from the Swedes and, with the permission of Germany, sent to Ukraine. The Czechs were also one of the first countries to supply Ukraine with artillery. At least 20, probably more, Dana 152mm self-propelled guns have been transferred, as well as an unknown quantity of 122mm 2S1 self-propelled guns. They have also supplied at least 20 RM-70 multiple rocket launcher systems. For air defence, the Czechs have provided 10 Strela 2 launchers, NATO designation SA-7, and 160 missiles to go with them, as well as the vehicle-based Strela 10, NATO designation SA-13. They have also supplied considerable quantities of small arms. Officially, the list includes 30,150 VZ-82 pistols, 5,000 VZ-58 assault rifles, 2,085 VZ-61 Scorpion submachine guns, 3,200 VZ-59 machine guns, 12 Dragunov sniper rifles, and 19 Falcon anti-material rifles. But several modern Bren 2 rifles of Czech manufacture have been seen in use with the UAF, as well as RPG-75 light anti-tank weapons. There have even been pictures of rather rare CZ-807s, which is surprising because not many of these were made. The Czech Republic has announced that they have supplied millions of rounds of ammunition, and it would be surprising if they hadn't also given munitions like 122mm rockets and artillery shells, 152mm artillery shells, Soviet origin anti-tank missiles, and RPG rockets that both they and the Ukrainians use. Denmark has supplied 300 Stinger missiles, 2,700 M72 Laws, 25 Skywatch Hedron tactical reconnaissance drones, 120mm mortars and munitions to go with them, and 2,000 sets of body armour. They are now planning on sending 50 M113 tracked and 25 Piranha 3 wheeled armoured personnel carriers. Estonia has been one of the main suppliers of Ukraine, with some estimates that it has expended a third of its annual defence budget on assistance. This has translated into thousands of tons of equipment being shipped. Amongst these are 9 122mm D30 towed howitzers, at least 7 Alvis 4 MRAPs, Javelin anti-tank missiles, anti-tank mines, and an unspecified number and type of small arms and ammunition. Officially, Finland has transferred 2,500 rifles and 1,500 light anti-tank weapons. My best guess is the latter is Apilas, which were in use with the UAF before the invasion, and old Chinese-made Type 56 rifles taken from reserve inventories. I also suspect that Finland is providing considerably more in terms of ammunition and other sundry support, but they sensibly don't seem to want to antagonise the neighbours by broadcasting the fact. A major arms supplier to Ukraine before the war, France has sent considerable quantities since the Russian invasion. Amongst these are Javelin and Milan anti-tank missiles, and probably Mistral anti-aircraft missiles, as well as Apilas light anti-tank rockets. France is also reported to have supplied advanced electro-optical and thermal observation equipment, The French have also stated that they intend to supply up to 12 Caesar 155mm self-propelled howitzers and tens of thousands of shells along with them. Though Germany's policies on supplying Ukraine have seemed to seesaw, there is no denying that they are a major supplier. Most importantly at the current moment is their stated intention to supply 7 PZH-2000 self-propelled howitzers. These are some of the most advanced weapons of their type in the world, and though very few in numbers, would be invaluable to the UAF. But the Germans aren't planning to send them until July, under current plans, and quite frankly, until the guns are in Ukraine, that counts for nothing. Similar is the German government's talk of supplying 50 Gepard anti-aircraft vehicles. Once again, they state these won't be available until July, plus with talk of not being able to provide ammunition for them, we shall see what actually occurs. In terms of what has been sent, well, that is still a considerable quantity. Germany has supplied 5,100 Matador light anti-tank weapons, 3,000 Panzerfaust 3 anti-tank weapons, though I assume that is the rockets and not 3,000 launchers, and 500 Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. Somewhat less useful were 2,700 ancient Strela 2 manpads that dated from the Cold War, and many of which were, somewhat unsurprisingly, reported to be defective. However, Germany has also supplied over 5,000 anti-tank mines, 23,000 helmets, over 20,000 sets of body armour, and 100,000 hand grenades. They have also reportedly supplied 100 MG3 machine guns and over 10 million rounds of ammunition. Additionally, they have supplied night vision gear and tactical drones. But probably the biggest contribution Germany is making is by supplying modern NATO standard weapons to countries sending Warsaw Pact weapons to Ukraine. An example of which is the sending of Leopard 2 tanks to the Czech Republic in exchange for the tanks that country has sent. Greece has supplied Ukraine with 20,000 AK-47 type rifles. These apparently were part of an arms seizure made in 2013 of a shipment that originated from, ironically, Ukraine. Greece in fact became a major user of Soviet origin weapons post-Cold War, which explains why they have also supplied Ukraine with 815 RPG-18 light anti-tank rockets, which were known to be in inventory, as well as 122mm artillery rockets. They have also been asked about supplying S-300 long-range anti-aircraft missiles, but have so far declined. Iran, I hear you say? Well, in a roundabout fashion. Iranian weapons are apparently being used by Ukrainian forces, as was spotted by the eagle-eyed watchers of Ukraine Weapons Tracker on Twitter. This is an Iranian-made mortar, which they produce in 81mm for their own use and in 82mm for export. And one of the biggest users of the latter are the Houthis of Yemen, several of whose arms shipments have been seized by the US Navy in the Gulf, some of which I have covered in the past because they are substantial and can include some extremely advanced weaponry. So the suspicion is that the US, with large quantities of seized Iranian shipments sitting in warehouses, has decided that they might be more usefully employed in Ukraine. Ireland has supplied €9 million worth of non-lethal equipment, amongst which are combat helmets. Another country that has stated it has supplied Ukraine but been scant on details, Italy has reportedly sent an undisclosed number of mortars, Stinger missiles, M2 Browning heavy machine guns, Beretta MG42/59 light machine guns, and Milan and Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons. They are also planning on sending FH-70 howitzers and Iveco LMV armoured carriers. Japan has sent unspecified quantities of body armour and combat helmets. Another Baltic state that is keen to assist Ukraine, Latvia has provided Stinger missiles, combat helmets, and 90 UAVs, possibly the Penguin C. Once again, Lithuania plays their cards close to their chests, but they state that they have donated 120mm mortars, anti-tank weapons, Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, ammunition, grenades, machine guns, and submachine guns. Specific they might not be, but I suspect they have sent examples of just about everything they have in their inventory. In fact, they, possibly along with their Baltic brethren, are the likely donors of American-made M14 rifles that have been seen in Ukrainian use, and which they themselves received in the post-Cold War period as military aid. Luxembourg state that they have supplied 100 N-Law light anti-tank weapons to Ukraine. That was in February, so it might well be more than that now, and other articles as well. Montenegro is another country that has limited itself to supplying non-lethal aid in the shape of helmets and armour. The Netherlands is a major supplier of weapons to Ukraine, though they have now imposed a restriction on details for security reasons. The government's initial contribution was composed of 5 Firefinder artillery locating radars, 2 Squire tactical battlefield surveillance radars, 10 Barrett M82 and 90 Accuracy International AX50 anti-material rifles, and 30,000 50 caliber rounds of ammunition to go along with them, 2 Seafox remote-operated underwater mine detection vehicles, 50 Stinger launchers with 200 missiles, 50 Panzerfaust 3s with 400 rockets, and several thousand helmets and sets of body armour. The Dutch government has also stated they intend to supply 5 advanced PZH-2000 self-propelled guns, adding to the 7 from Germany. In addition, Dutch YPR-765 APCs have been seen in Ukrainian hands. These are an improved version of the M113, and the Netherlands had 500 in storage. They now seem to be sending them off to the UAF. New Zealand's initial contribution was to provide 473 helmets and 1,066 sets of body armour. They have since donated around $5 million to buying weapons and ammunition for Ukraine, plus provided training teams. North Macedonia has publicly stated that they are supplying aims to Ukraine. Details are scant, but the assumption is that this is enabling the country to send quantities of their Soviet origin weaponry that dates to before the breakup of Yugoslavia and exchange it for NATO compatible equipment. Norway is another Russian neighbour that, probably unsurprisingly, has taken a dim view of Russia's invasion and contributed to Ukraine's defence. Officially, they have contributed 4,000 M72 Law anti-tank rockets, helmets, body armour, and their entire stock of Mistral anti-aircraft missiles, which apparently is 100 missiles and an unknown, assumably lesser, number of launchers. But the Norwegians have, like most others, now gone stum on further supplies. This has led to speculation on the sudden pulling of M109 self-propelled howitzers from storage and being seen driven around on semi-tractors on the country's roads, with reports being that 20 of these will be supplied to Ukraine. In terms of quantities of heavy weapons, Poland is the lead supplier to Ukraine, which, considering the Poles and Russians' mutual histories, probably isn't too surprising. Poland is the big provider of tanks, with between 230 and 240 T-72s being supplied from Polish stocks. Pictures of these in action and modified with ERA blocks have already become public. The Poles have also supplied at least 40 BVP-1 infantry fighting vehicles, the Polish-built version of the BMP. In addition, they have supplied over 20 122mm 2S1 self-propelled howitzers and a comparable number of BM-21 Grad multiple rocket launchers. In terms of Polish-made weaponry seen in Ukrainian hands, it is known that they have supplied considerable quantities of RPG-76 light anti-tank weapons, LMP 0217 60mm mortars, Piorun manpads, grenade launchers, and WZ-88 Tantal and Grot C16A2 rifles. Other armoured vehicles apparently sent are an unknown quantity of AMZ Zik-2 infantry mobility vehicles. To be honest, the Poles are probably, once again, sending examples of everything they produce, as well as vast quantities of munitions. For example, Poland is one of the few countries that has openly supplied air-to-air missiles, with 100 R-73s provided for use by the Ukrainian Air Force. It is apparently quite open about what they have sent and plan to send. Already dispatched are G3 rifles, night vision gear, grenades, and all sorts of ammunition. They have also sent 4 Iveco M40.12 WMP infantry vehicles, plus have announced they intend to send 15 M113 APCs and 5 M114A1 155mm howitzers, which would mean another campaign for this World War II stalwart. Romania, like Bulgaria, is one of those NATO countries that still has factories capable of producing quantities of Soviet origin ammunition and compatible small arms for export. Officially, Romania has only donated non-lethal equipment, but the amount of NATO military flights that leave the country for the logistics centres in Poland suggests they may be another major supplier. Slovakia's big official contribution was supplying a S-300 anti-aircraft missile battery. This is the standard system used by the Ukrainians, and trying to source replacements has been a priority for nations supporting Ukraine. Additionally, Slovakia has supplied parts for Ukrainian Air Force MiGs and probably ordnance for them. They have also supplied unspecified types of anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons to the UAF, as well as munitions. Slovenia has supplied helmets, firearms and ammunition to Ukraine, but is now apparently in the process of sending M84 tanks, a Yugoslavian version of the T-72, for which they are reportedly going to receive German Leopard 2s in exchange. South Korea has supplied an undisclosed amount of uniform and personal military gear. Spain has sent an unspecified amount and type of small arms, along with ammunition, as well as 1,370 C-90 light anti-tank weapons. They have also provided 20 Euro VAMTAC infantry vehicles and 1 NG-31 armoured ambulance. Again, another Russian neighbour alarmed by their behaviour, Sweden has provided at least 10,000 AT-4 light anti-tank weapons, 5,000 M90 helmets, and 5,000 sets of body armour. Turkey's most famous contribution to Ukraine is Bayraktar TB2 drones. Again, the Turks are close-mouthed about how many they have supplied, and as the system was in use with the UAF before the conflict and exact losses are unknown, it is impossible to be sure how many are in use, but estimates range from 20 to 50. Also observed in UAF service are mini Bayraktars, which are a small tactical reconnaissance drone. Turkey is likely also supplying other items from their stockpiles and extensive arms industry, but there are no current details on this. An early supporter of Ukraine, the UK started shipping weapons before the conflict broke out. So far, an estimated 6,900 NLAW anti-tank weapons have been supplied, alongside an unspecified amount of Javelin anti-tank launchers and missiles. Also included in the anti-tank warfare bracket are an unknown number of Brimstone missiles, which I reported on previously and which appear to be now in frontline use. For air defence, the UK has supplied a small number of Starstreak mounted on Storm armoured vehicles, as well as an undetermined number of Martlet manpads. The latter have apparently become quite popular for shooting down Russian drones. The UK has also committed to delivering 35 FV-103 Spartan APCs, as well as another 40 tracked armoured vehicles, which is suspected to be made up of a mix of Samaritan ambulances, Samson recovery vehicles, and Scimitar scout tanks. They have also said that they will donate another 80 wheeled armoured vehicles made up of a combination of Mastiff MRAPs, Wolfhound heavy tactical support vehicles, and Husky tactical support vehicles. One mystery was a stated desire by the British government to supply heavy artillery to Ukraine, which inspired questions as to what would be sent exactly, as the British military doesn't have a lot of that on hand. This seems to have been resolved by a statement from the New Zealanders that they are going to assist British efforts to train Ukrainian troops to use the L118 and L119 series of light howitzers. Though not ideal, these guns are in widespread usage and quite a few of Ukraine's supporters use them or have them in reserves in some numbers. The Brits have also said that they have supplied unspecified electronic warfare equipment and counter-artillery radars, and that they intend to send Malloy Aeronautics T-150 cargo drones, which is novel. So, the United States is providing quite a bit of stuff. I'm just going to leave it at that. Now, I suppose you'll only complain in the comments if I do that, so... The USA has now signed the new Lend-Lease Act, so this information, what there is of it, is basically obsolete the moment you watch this video. That's how much the US is sending to Ukraine, and they have spent or committed to spend something close to $50 billion in equipment for the UAF. But, of the officially declared quantities, at the moment I'm recording this, they have sent 108 M777 155mm artillery pieces, 1,400 Stingers, 4,600 Javelins, 5 Mi-17 helicopters, 3 patrol boats, over 20 radar sets for air defence and artillery locating, 300 grenade launchers, 400 shotguns, 600 machine guns, probably M240 and M2 Brownings, which have both appeared in Ukraine, literally hundreds of Humvees, 1,000 quote light anti-armour weapons, which I assume are M72 Laws or shoulder-launched multi-purpose assault weapons, 6,000 AT-4 anti-armour systems, several hundred Switchblade loitering munitions, and 121 Phoenix Ghost loitering munitions. In terms of other small arms, it seems more complex as officially the USA has sent 5,000 rifles. But while increasing numbers of M4s do appear to be getting pictured, a whole host of other weapons of American origin have been sighted. In fact, Matt at the Armourer's Bench has done a whole video just on Savage arms rifles in use in Ukraine. And both Kimber Arms and Kel-Tec, both private American firearms manufacturers, have pledged to donate several hundred examples of their wares to the Ukrainian armed forces. So basically, anything could end up getting sent, but I suspect that M16s and M4s are going to get a lot more prevalent in coming months. The USA has also pledged to send another 11 Mi-17 military helicopters, which were originally intended for Afghanistan, and 200 M113 APCs. And that, I think, about wraps it up. I need to reiterate again that this list is definitely very far from complete, and large quantities of weapons will be underreported. And I have not really gone into the vast amounts of other basic equipment and ammunition that is being supplied to Ukraine. But with the war still very much in the balance, expect the amounts of weapons being shipped to rise substantially in the future. So if you want to do your own tracking, I advise the following as sources. For following the supply of big ticket items like tanks, keep an eye on the Oryx blog page on the issue of what has been sent and what is proposed to be sent. For tracking the individual systems as they are identified as they appear in Ukraine, down to even grenade types, try Ukraine Weapons Tracker on Twitter. For tracking British commitments, the UK Defence Journal is very good. And for a general roundup on officially declared figures, there is actually a pretty good Wikipedia page. I shall link to all of these in the relevant article on military matters, which has a link in the description here. Hope this has been informative, and I'm off to put an ice pack on my head.